How's it going, YouTube? Malagant here. We will be talking about my Shieldbreaker. So this is going to be some sort of like a guide for the EOR Fire Shieldbreaker. And I think the video might actually end up being a little bit too long. So apologies from now. Simply because like I kind of want to also like demonstrate the character while talking about like how the play style is and what you're trying to do for the most part. What are like the strengths of the character? What are the minuses? I usually don't to build the guides simply because I don't necessarily um, usually make conventional stuff. I don't necessarily care about Crucible all that much. I don't necessarily care about SR right now that much either. But I did went ahead and like tried out pretty much everything with this character, and every single one of them was a success. Recently, just like finished the Crucible Gladiator 170, and I did play a little bit like on SR as well. But most of the time I do very much like enjoy just doing like chill farming, doing a lot of like rogue dungeons, doing a lot of nemesis runs with my characters. But this one specifically is like incredibly unique like compared to any other character that I have played, because not necessarily is this or that tanky, not necessarily it's like ridiculously good damage. It is the play style. It is very unique for Grimdawn. It's simply the fact that you don't necessarily need to focus a target. You don't necessarily need to care about positioning. You don't necessarily need to focus about like care about like, let's say, your survival most of the time. Not at all. Actually, it's very funny. Unless something entirely goes wrong for some time to come. Actually, it needs to keep on going wrong for some time. Uh, and another unique thing about this is that you don't necessarily need to care about your buttons all that much either, because you could just pop almost everything, almost every single fight in a mid-sifil toll, and it's just going to be working just fine. And as you can see, like it is a very potent AoE um, in some sort of like a radius around the character, like wherever you are moving. If you have like, if you're familiar with like, let's say, Path of Exile, Righteous Fire for instance, um, you could definitely say the same thing about this one. There's some sort of like a um, some sort of like a fire AoE that is going on around you all the time, thanks to all the procs that we're taking. So one thing that I'm gonna mention is that like, even though we are like a Whirlwind character, Whirlwind is not necessarily the most damage that we deal. In my opinion, at least, as far as I can tell you. There's a lot of procs that are going on with the character, and we are also incredibly offensive when it comes to the offensive ability. So we have like a lot of crit chance most of the time, and on top of this, we have a very good critical hit damage on this character. It's pretty good, like 83%. All of these stats that you can see, they're definitely like the tankier side of things, 100%. So if you would like to do it, you could definitely do some sort of like a incredibly more offensive character out of this. 100%. You could go a lot more offensive ability, simply because like I'm using, just to give a little bit of an example, I'm using Ira's Patience for instance. If you look at the bottom of this, it's the augmentation that you buy from, if I'm not mistaken, from Solal. Again, from the Solal people, we could actually get something that is going to be giving me even more fire and burn damage, and on top of that, maybe some HP, maybe some offensive ability. You could definitely fit something else over there as well. And this is not the only example either. You could definitely, step by step make this character a lot more offensive than it is. Not that it is necessary, but I am playing hardcore and I wanted to have the most fun with this character. I wanted to push it, like even in Gladiator Crucible for once, and it was a success, so it's alright. I actually really enjoy that. Like, this is very tanky as well, because like I stream a lot, as you know, and during the stream I just like space out, I check the chat a lot, so I didn't necessarily want to focus that much on my survival either. Now that said, just closing the subject about like the offensive part of the character, how we are just, simply playing with like Ascension, and then just charging in with the Wise Might, and then whirling away. And while whirling away, we have like multiple sources of like procs. We're going to be detailing in that in the near future. And whenever the cooldown is up from the Wise Might, we Wise Might one more time. That's pretty much like the playstyle, about the offensiveness of the character. But on top of this, we have a little bit of an option of like a thermite mine. It's not necessarily the most pleasant thing to use in this game, definitely not. So therefore, I'm just using it against, let's say, I'm just using it against like the beefier targets, let's say. It is just to get like some extra minus resistance. So if I find like a boss, for instance, right over here, we're gonna fight one, or if I was fighting Kuba back in the forest before entering the ancient grove, I definitely, you know, throw a couple of thermite mines, make sure that like he's on top of it some sort, and then I pop everything and just like turn around them. Also use the wise might every single cooldown, also because wise might is linked to the devotion of the meteor. So this is like how you offensively play this character. And as you can also see, like we have 2 potions in my action bars. One of them is the Kaiman potion, which is giving me fire damage and burn damage. A little bit of a chance of like to flat fire damage as well. And the other one is the defensive potion, the Courageous Tincture. You should probably use this on like every single character out there. It gives me like defensive ability and armor percentage for quite some time actually. During that time you could definitely like kill pretty much any boss out there almost with a character like this one. Let's go back to the town. I think this demonstration should be enough, to be honest with you. And we did cover like the offensive style of the character. Let's talk about like the defensive parts a little bit before jumping into like detail. What is going on over here is that like we are basically thriving for having more HP. Um, Simply because there's a lot of like percentages in play, such as like especially the best line of defense that we have in this character is the Blast Shield and then Resilience. I personally didn't like Blast Shield up to this character, not even kidding, simply because alone it wasn't necessarily reliable for me all that much. Maybe I didn't necessarily have high enough HP characters, maybe I didn't necessarily have good Demolitionist combinations before, but this time it's making a difference for me, and this time I'm really enjoying it, simply because this one has a modifier coming from my necklace at the same time. If you read it, 12% health restored. Around the middle of the screen right now it says to the blast shield, so we have a little bit of like a modifier that is adding to this blast shield as well. So the second that this thing procs, it heals me a little bit for 4 seconds. It gives me an absorption, a very big absorption actually. That's also why I have lots of points into this. And this absorption is basically, simply put, is absorbing the flat number from every single instance that you take. So damage over time, you know, some hit from the left, some hit from the right. There's absolutely no limit. As long as it's different instances, it's always absorbing 1000, and it's also after the mitigation. So it's very big. Like 1000 is crazy. You probably are kind of like an immortal during this 4-second period if you have like an already optimized character, to be honest with you. On top of this, it also gives like quite a lot of like overkill, let's say, of resistances, and then turns back and sort of like synergizes with resilience as well. Resilience is yet another proc, some sort of like blast shield. In fact, most of the time they're both going to be procking at the same time. This one's procs at the 66% of your life, and this one at 60. Just because of like how they proc. The more HP you have, the better. Obviously, it doesn't necessarily mean that like you should, you know, sacrifice too much HP just for this. But yeah, you know, having a high amount of like 60% HP definitely means a lot more than, you know, sitting at like 4000 HP when you're like 60%. Definitely, it makes a massive difference. On the other hand, resilience gives you increased healing effects. We have a lot of healing effects. We're going to be talking about this as well. It gives you like crazy amounts of defensive ability, another percentage again, and it gives you physical resistance with, again, maximum resistances. So if I'm not mistaken, we are gaining about like 11% maximum resistance to cap on top of everything. So our like lowest resistance is going to be becoming 91% or something. It's almost unkillable at that point for 4 seconds duration. Now, how the engagement works versus something, let's say, relevant, some sort of like anything that's capable of, you know, give some sort of like a beating to my character. We pop the Ascension. The Ascension is not only offensive, but at the same time it gives you a very good absorption with it. So about like 166 is very relevant. Again, like at the very start I said, you know, Blast Shield is giving you 1000, this one is giving you only 166. But when you have an optimized character such as this one, like this good optimized, you won't be taking that much of a hit. So therefore, if you were taking like 300 of a hit, now 166 is, you know, subtracted from that. So you have like what, 134 or something remaining, I suppose. Uh, Stuff like this makes a massive difference. So as we are engaging into something relevant, we pop the Ascension, we engage, and then damage is substantially lower already. And we will be talking about the healing effects that are kicking in during the entire combat, and it's very reliable procs as well, especially the devotions. But let's say that like they managed to lower us to 60% during the 4 second period, like we're almost immortal. And then guess what? Afterwards we have Ascension back up again. And we didn't even necessarily use a potion yet. In most of the cases, like even though I'm in hardcore, I kind of bait the blast shield because why not? Just, you know, it literally is that reliable. Nothing is going to be going through, you know, 20,000 HP, unless I'm fighting like Kalagadra or maybe Ravager. Um, Maybe Lokar might be able to do it as well, if I'm not mistaken. I'm not really sure about that one actually. So, back to back a lot of defenses. Now, there's some sustain into this that is build as well. We are not necessarily life leeching at all, not with this build, but we do have the Behemoth, Giant's Blood, which is pretty good, very good actually. If you would like to, I would definitely advise you to like turn back in the video, check out the, you know, the fighting that we had, the fights that we had in the Ancient Grove, and try to pay attention to like the procs on the left bottom over here. The Behemoth looks like a green dot. Maybe I can actually like show you really quickly. And the Wayward Soul, the secondary proc that I'm gonna show you that is healing me, this one is going to be like a red dot. They're both about like 10 seconds, up to 10 seconds, and they're very reliable. They're usually not that reliable in any spec out there, but as I was saying, this character is unique. So this one, the green dot is the Behemoth. This one is going to be the Wayward Soul, and they both proc for about like 8 seconds. They usually proc quite a bit. The unique style of this character is the reason because we go in and we want to be in the middle of all of them because our AoE is all around and we don't necessarily lose DPS to the left or to the right or maybe even to the outer circle, you know, to the further either. It is ridiculous the amount of DPS and how reliable it is for like, you know, a radius around me. So I want to be around the middle and I want everything to be coming and clumping exactly on me. Just thanks to this, it obviously makes these procs a lot more reliable too. And they're constantly up. The same thing can be said for Inspiration as well. Even though Inspiration has only 15% chance to proc, it is almost up every single cooldown, just the way that you play this. You would say, well, do you really end up finding that many enemies during that time? Like, yes, you do, because like this character is the most mobile thing that I have ever played. Again, like this is just crazy. It doesn't necessarily feel like Grim Dawn either. It is that fast, and you can definitely space out and just do things in a very, very fast fashion, let's say, that you wouldn't be doing otherwise. So, I think I just mentioned about like the inspiration. We can definitely talk about my devotions a little bit, and then afterwards let's talk about the skills and the items, and then I'll try to talk about like if you're going to want to make a build like this, what you need to do, especially if you're starting from a fresh account. I'll give you like some unfortunate news, but I'll also try to, you know, handhold a little bit and say like what you could do to try and build up to something like this. Because this character right over here is definitely a lot of like item dependency, a lot of item requirements, let's say. So about the devotions, the last passive proc that we have is the inspiration. Very reliable again because of, you know, all the things that are attacking to us all the time, any sort of a fight it is. This thing right over here is giving us like very high amounts of like offense and defense. Extremely good for this character again because we have just something like this is enough, and this is not only the um, of percentage offensive that we are gaining either. But yeah, this alone is already ridiculous. So 15% right from there. So if we had basically in this case when we press that 15%, it becomes 3.2k. So if we had this one over here 110, it would have been a lot more simply because, you know, again, this is a very flat number, it's a very big number. the 15% is going to be even higher than that. If you understand what I'm saying, they all help each other and carry you, further and further each and every time. So every single node over here is ridiculously good for us. So Biosarp is one of the must to have, in my opinion, in almost any elemental build out there, but especially in this one because you can have some energy issues. Biosarp completely deletes those energy issues every time it procs. It replenishes the energy and gives you ridiculous amounts of energy regeneration as well. That is very important. Um, Maybe this thing can be replaceable if you don't want to if you don't necessarily want to play with Lotus. But then again, this is also, in my opinion, very good. Healing effects increase, physical resistance, and then energy generation, a little bit of health as well. Absolute must to take. Back and ridiculous of a constellation for every single two-hander out there. Um, Chariot and the Behemoth, in my opinion, must to have as well. Maybe Chariot can be dropped. I would definitely not. It's not only armor but also defensive ability and another heal that is going at the back, and it is making you very, very sustainable, and that's what you need. You want to stay, even versus the strongest enemy, you want to stay in close range and you want to clump them all up, just make a mess out of them, let's say. Jackal is an okay constellation simply because attack speed scales very good, a little bit of physical resistance, it's alright as well. Our physical resistance is not necessarily the highest, it's not too low either. I would say about 24% is probably average, probably a number that you should have at the end game. I could see it being higher than this for sure. Let's talk about the offensive procs. If I'm not mistaken, we have only two of them in the entire devotion tree, and those are the only things that I haven't mentioned. Well, you can actually say three with the Hyrian, even though that's a passive proc, but it's an offensive one. So we definitely have the Meteor Shower. Meteor Shower must be linked to Wise Might. Wise Might is a charge. Charge is one of the highest chances of proccing a big constellation like this. So every time I charge, you're gonna have a Meteor Shower. Remember that I have two Meteor Showers, Rain of Fire on the Infernal Brimstone. Every time I crit, chances are I'll most likely crit. So if I charge, if there was a crit also, there's going to be two in between. Every single cooldown, you will need to use the Wise Might for your playstyle, simply because they're kind of colliding. And even if Wise Might, this thing was cooldown when you use the Wise Might, as you can see, there's going to be some sort of a flame on the floor, and the flame patch is definitely capable of proccing the meteor also. That is yet another synergy that's going on. Very, very good too. It's extremely fun. We have the Hyrian's Glare. Hyrian is one of my new favorite constellations for elemental stuff, even if I'm not carrying a shield around. So the worst nodes over here is these two. One of them is giving us shield damage blocked, which we don't have a shield. The other one is giving us shield damage blocked again, and pierce resistance. Those two nodes are pretty much dead for us, almost. The elemental, flat damage is alright, I suppose, and the pierce resistance is kind of okay. But the rest of the nodes are very good. But I want you to take a good look at Hyrian's Glare. It's 30% chance when hit, and it's only on 2 seconds cooldown. Now I already showed you how the playstyle works. Again, we're constantly getting hit. This is going to be proccing pretty much every 2-3 seconds. Look at the 70% main hand damage scale from this thing. Our main hand is incredibly strong, very, very strong weapon. So it's going to be hitting and dealing quite a lot of damage by itself as well, even though this thing right over here is some sort of a passive proc. Most of the time the actives are the stronger ones. This is definitely yet another very strong proc for us. So the last thing is going to be the Elemental Storm. We are definitely gaining the resist reduction over here, and on top of that there's a little bit of elemental and burn damage as well that we are capable of scaling quite high. I would like to mention some sort of if you're in softcore, if you'd like to change something, what is it that you need to change? Sure, the common question would be the Witchblade. Why don't you have the Witchblade? Isn't it too big? The fire resistance minus, I think it's minus 23%. Well, my damage is alright. And to have especially these two nodes right over here, you kinda need to drop these two nodes to be able to have this. And if I'm not mistaken, you also need to drop something else too. I think you needed another build up than Lotus. So what I'm trying to say is that to have this, I do need to sacrifice some stuff. And when I put it on a scale, it wasn't necessarily the best sacrifice. simply because I didn't really have like a very good way of like putting this immediately on my target, the target that I wanted to either. I was like ending up putting this on top of the Summon Guardians, or maybe the Sudden Strike, which I really don't want to utilize during especially hard fights. Um, Sudden Strike is a Chaos Strike, by the way. The Shadow Strike from the Nightblade is the same ability. That's what I'm using, but you can definitely feel free to like, you know, use something else if you would like to. When it comes to like the mobility component for your medallion. So as I was saying, like this is one of the, you know, other things that you could definitely go for. It would be good. It would definitely be good. But especially what you need to pay attention when you're going for this is that check what you're trading for it. Definitely don't give up on the Meteor Shower. That is your hardest build up. I would never give up on such a thing. And on top of that, like if you end up taking this, I would definitely suggest you to like put it on some sort of like a very reliable proc if you can figure that out. So for me personally, it wasn't a good trade, but it is an alright constellation. The other one would be actually, in my opinion, Fissure would be a little bit better than Solar Witchblade, especially for the build that we're playing. Because I want you to think about this. As I told you at the beginning, our Whirlwind is the mediocre damage in this build. Every single proc that we can add on top is an extra DPS that is coming. So Fissure would just be another extra DPS. And Fissure is a very reliable and very high DPS actually. The way that we are playing is that we are clumping things up and then we are rolling over them in about like 5 to 6 seconds is finishing. Look at this Fissure. It would be like incredibly good for a build like this. It's just too expensive for me to go for. I couldn't go for it. If you can figure out a way, by all means, you could go as well. I think, if I'm not mistaken, to be able to go for the Fissure, you're gonna need to drop the Bard's Harp. In my opinion, Bard's Harp is invaluable. But you could maybe find a way to do it, and you could mess around, especially if you're in softcore. You could definitely have a little bit of more of a margin to mess around with. Feel free to do this as well. It's good. At this point, one thing that I'm going to mention is that, like, after, you know, checking out all the constellations, what you're seeing right now is not necessarily how I level this character. That is the case for every single character of mine. I continue evolving as there's, like, you know, stuff that are progressing with the character itself, and this not necessarily is like a good or like a friendly character for like a fresh account either. I leveled it up like just in the videos of my YouTube, basically with the wires, my charging around. You could check it out. It's on my YouTube 1 to 50 Oathkeeper. I leveled it up exactly like that, and I in fact continued the same style with just Wire's Might till level 94. And then at 94, I just put together all the legendaries that I had, that I've been, you know, collecting for this build, and then I switched into this devotion build as well. So just following this devotion build and the skills, you might not be having a very good time while leveling. Usually leveling, you have a better time while you're leveling with another spec. In every single mastery, I could say the same. Let's look at the skills a little bit. So we obviously have the Eye of Reckoning and the Soul Fire. As I said, not the greatest DPS. You might ask, like, why? Simply because we don't necessarily have the best conversion. One of the reasons why this weapon over here is very important for us is, you know, several different reasons actually. One of them is look at the top left, the implicit values. It is flat fire, so there's no physical damage that is going. The secondary would be the pluses. Demo and Oathkeeper, they're both gaining +2, very big. The third would be the attack speed and the offensive ability. Offensive ability is very good as well for us. As I said, like, it's extremely important to stay as high as possible on this guy. Simply because the fourth is the Rain of Fire, which is 100% chance on critical attacks, so we need to reliably crit all the time. Not only for that, but also our crit damage is very high, so we kind of want that. Yeah, this also can be increased even further than this as well if you're in softcore, if you'd like to mess around with it too. So thanks to that weapon, our main hand damage is fire, and then obviously there's some like fire flat values on the Eye of Reckoning as well. But then we don't necessarily convert. That is not the best thing. So we have just a tiny little bit of like conversion from here, 12%, and then on top of that we have a little bit more conversion on the Enchanted Flint, which is like 10. So we have about like 22% of the fire damage being converted, if I'm not mistaken, unless I'm like missing something over here or somewhere. But I don't think so, honestly. So at the end of the day, like, we do have some, what I'm trying to say is that like fire damage and lightning damage remaining in the Eye of the Storm, Eye of the Reckoning. I'm just gonna call it Whirlwind. And anyways, like the Whirlwind definitely is not necessarily the best thing that we are scaling, but we have lots of fire procs on the side, and this thing is definitely putting all this together. And since it's attacking very fast, as you can see, like 0.16 of a second every attack, it's 100% attack speed, and we have about like 160%. So you could probably have a little bit more with like better gear too. Yeah, right now 160. So this is just our mobility. One thing that I'm gonna mention about this is that like this volcanic stride is very reliable. Um, just the way that you play, you know, you engage, you know, meteors comes down, and the monsters are usually around the volcanic stride. There's fire on the floor. So if you would like to, you could definitely put more points into this. Where can you take those points from? Temper would be a good idea to take it from. I don't necessarily know anywhere else, to be honest with you. The rest is, in my opinion, very good. The next one is going to be the Divine Mandate that we will talk about. Divine Mandate is a like ridiculously good exclusive, especially for a build like this. It's giving us almost everything that we need, including the crit damage, and the crit damage value is extremely big on it, so it goes very good for this character. On the side, we have these peasants that are like running around me. Those peasants are giving us like 38%, you know, fire resistance reduction, and that is a very big value as well. That's also why I went into the ultimate ranks. We have a very good aura over here, Presence of Virtue. The simplest reason to like max it out is obviously because of the offensive ability, and at the same time it's also increasing the energy generation per second. Energy generation is very important for us. Like you really don't want to have a character that you're like, you know, whirlwinding and at the same time having an energy issue with. You don't necessarily have any energy issue on this character at all, not with these stats, but it's definitely possible for you to have. So not to have it, you should probably like give as many points into this as possible. Haven is giving you just healing effects increase. We have a lot of healing effects as we discussed, especially from like the devotions. We also have the healing potion, obviously, that being increased as well. But on top of that, recently this has been changed from flat to percentage. The percentage ends up being actually better for us. And 21% health at like 13 was very valuable. So we're sitting on 13. I cannot give even more. That's just a value point. This doesn't necessarily give all that much, just to reflect damage reduction and a little bit of like a physical damage as well. We can barely use that because of the 30% over here. Some of the procs are capable of using it a little bit more. The Ascension is, you know, bread and butter. Basically, every time we see anything that is relevant on the screen, instantly pop the Ascension before touching them. 100%. It's incredibly important both for like offense and defense and CC. You know, reduces stun, freeze, and trap, petrify. This is ridiculous. Like, I wish it was possible for me to, you know, make this a little bit more of an uptime. But things are getting a little bit better as you like have a lot more DPS, because you pop this, you kill the target. Well, you don't necessarily care about it being down anymore, do you? So, you know, you kind of want to get the kill while the Ascension is going on. After the Ascension is down, what you want to do is that, like, if you continue fighting, you better make sure that, like, you still have the option of, like, having resilience and the blast shield, you know, proccing, let's say. So this is going to be the Oathkeeper. I don't necessarily have, like, any regrets over here. Nothing that I would like to take at all. The only thing, as I said, that I could have given more points into his Volcanic Stride, but I have decided to go for the Temper instead over here, which is like, you know, just flat defensive ability. I really like it. Flame Touch is a ridiculous aura for us. It is extremely good. Flat fire, and burn, you know, percentages, multipliers, and on top of that we're gaining that offensive ability as well, and it's pretty big, and it continues scaling very good towards the ultimate ranks as well. Thermite Mine, honestly, like you could pretty much like leave it on the bottom. I don't necessarily have 7 points at all. Maybe I have like 2 points or something into this. The rest is coming from my, you know, gear. You know, giving pluses to either the demo or the Thermite Mine alone. I'm honestly not sure. The last thing that we will talk about is the Vindictive Flames, some sort of like an aura around us that is, you know, burning stuff around me. At the same time, it gives me very good health regeneration as well. And on top of everything, It is linked to Ultramarine Wrath, which is every now and then, zapping the enemy's 6 targets, and not only fire and lightning damage, but at the same time, electrocute damage. And this damage also is capable of like life leeching, so the bigger the better. I decided to sit on 12. It was actually 11, and some YouTube comments suggested 12 is, putting one more target up, so I should do it, and it was a very good comment, to be honest with you. Lastly, this thing over here is giving us total speed, so movement speed, attack speed, cast speed. Excuse me, it is very, very good. Definitely. Would there be some sort of like a regret over here, or like anything that I would consider taking more? I don't necessarily think so. As I said, like the only thing that I could change is probably the volcanic stride. Otherwise, I'm very happy. Before finalizing that, why Demolitionist instead of Inquisitor? I'm not going to be going into this subject so much, but I have received the same question from multiple people. Could you play this as Paladin? 100% you could play it. I didn't necessarily find a better weapon than this, so your Paladin is going to be obviously missing +2s, which is going to Inquisitor from this weapon. This weapon alone was incredibly important because of the Vindictive Flame, because of the burn damage, because of the multipliers and the increased duration to the burn, because of the offensive ability, energy generation, crazy amounts of attack speed, and most importantly, the proc with the fire flat damage. Every single thing about the Infernal Brimstone is fitting this. So you're giving up, you're sacrificing some things when you go for Paladin. And on top of that, most of the people that are coming up with the Paladin idea has this, in my opinion, misconception that they would like to go for Aura of Censure because holy shit, Aura of Censure, get more burn around you, you get more minus resistance, but you're dropping Divine Mandate, and you will have absolutely no pluses to Inquisitor in that case. I want you to heavily consider the fact that you're going to be spending 30 points to build up, not only to build up to Aura of Censure, but also put, so 18 points to build up to it, and then 12 points into the Censure. That is 30 points just to have 12 out of 12 Censure, which is only giving you minus resistances, absolutely nothing else. Versus 50% crit damage, which I have about like 30% crit chance, and 200% fire and burn. Also, that trauma is being converted tiny little bit, and then also increased duration as well. And to do this, we are only spending 12 points. So the 18 points is going somewhere else. It's going to Ascension, it's going to Presence of Virtue, it's most likely going to Temper as well in total. Literally, that's what it is. So even if I was a Paladin, I would leave it at 32, just like I did on the demo. I would take the Seal of Inquisitor. Would it be playable? It would be very strong. It would still be very strong, but I think Demolitionist is the better combination here, especially for this setup. You could probably come up with like another setup or something. That's entirely up to you. You could actually let me know in the comments if you would like to come up with like another setup also. The last thing that we're going to be checking over here, guys, is going to be the itemization of the character. Let's start talking about what are the musts to have. Is this character some sort of like a starting character? No, absolutely not. Like in my opinion, as I said multiple times, this mace is too big. You probably want that weapon to be able to play the spec in the first place. What would be like the next must to have? Like this is very big. Giving pluses to Oathkeeper, giving good pluses to Ultramarine Wrath. That's okay. And then on top of that, it's like scaling the right things. It's giving you energy regeneration, which is very important. Most important is lowering the cooldown of the Ascension, and then it also like buffs or like modifies a little bit of the Vindictive Flame, which is kind of cool. Probably not that necessary, but would still be probably strong. So this is probably following it, secondary. But I do want to talk about something, like you cannot necessarily have like green items all over the place. You do want to have procs, like that. I want you to understand like that's the most important part of this character. So you're gonna need to have like proccing ring, because you only have limited amount of places where you can have procs. You need to have like a fire proccing ring or an elemental proccing ring. There's a lot of them out there. What can you have? Let me see. You can have the elemental balance rings, right? These rings, very good rings. These are craftable as well. Incredibly good rings. They would go very good with this. you know what, like they're probably even better damage than what I am wearing right now. The only reason why I'm wearing these is that like they're very good for the burn, and they're also very good for the offensive ability. And also they are giving like very good pluses, but are they mandatory? Absolutely not. You could go for these. Otherwise you could also go for this. The Rain of Ice and Fire. You probably understand what I'm doing here. Like a very good proc is a mandatory thing on the rings. I'm using 3 pieces of Ulzruin. It's definitely making things a little bit easier, making you a lot more offensive, especially on the burn side of things. Also giving you a little bit like more physical resistance in this case. Is it mandatory? The Ulzruin said no, probably not. You could definitely find yourself some like very potent fire damaging things. You can maybe go to Shattered Realm, try to get like the Shattered Realm necklace. It would be going, just fine. Definitely, you will be having more resistances than me, in fact, and it would be working out just fine. It's not mandatory, but definitely focus on procs all over the place. Same goes for gloves. The gloves are coming with another proc that is called the Volcanic Worm. And these are craftable as well, if I'm not mistaken. So unless you have something like this, maybe you could try and find another proccing gloves. I'm not really sure if there's any. The medallion, there's a couple of options, in fact. One of the options is the Infernal Misery. It has a cool proc, not so bad. The other option is, if I can find it, this one, the Mythical Volcanum. This one's craftable as well. It has a very good proc, and it has very good, Volcanic Stride and Thermite Mine pluses as well. Incredibly good resistances on top of everything. This is kind of like more of an offensive medallion, if you like compare the one that I'm using and this one. We are gaining about like 120% fire damage. Is a no-brainer to change. The reason that I'm using the Mark of Divinity is, I talked about this, like the HP is very important, the health regeneration is very important. We do have quite a lot of health regeneration for a normal character. It's almost about like 500 per second while I'm fighting, which is very good in my opinion. I would still not have used this if it wasn't for the last part. The last part is the Flame Touched, also Flame Touch and the Divine Mandate pluses, so we are getting like +5 to very important spells that we have already talked about. So like +3 to over there, which is incredible, and then +2 over here, which is very good as well. So if it wasn't for those, I think I would have definitely continued using the Volcanum, yeah, on the medallion, but definitely not a must. So I'm using like 2 green items over here. You have like a lot of options. I recently found this belt is like ridiculous. I've never seen anything like this before. Honestly, this dropped me from Port Valkyrie while streaming, and it was ridiculous. But to be honest with you, you don't necessarily need to worry about it so much, because there's a legendary that is crazy more offensive than this. I just had to like use this because the stun resistance is too big on that guy. Yeah, this is basically the belt that you want to go for. Very good offensive ability. It has like burn, it has fire damage, it has Vindictive Flame, it has 1+ to everything in Demo, it has Divine Mandate +2. This belt right here, and maybe, arguably made for this character in the first place. So this is a belt, but even if you don't find this, there's a lot of different options as well right over here. Every single one of them are incredibly good options. So basically Crimson Lotus, Cataclysm Pact, Scorchbearer Sash, and Dark Blaze. Every single one of those would go perfectly, but Ulzruin's Torment is probably the best one. For the pants, again, I'm using some green ones that I have crafted on the blacksmith. You could definitely go for something else. You could go for some sort of like an elemental proc. If I'm not mistaken, there's some sort of like an elemental blasting pants. You could go for a craft yourself. I crafted these myself on the blacksmith, or you could go for like Barbarous Pants, which is giving you crazy amounts of offensive ability, and also Battle Cry, which is also gonna, make you even more offensive than you are already. If you're a softcore player, if you want to like have the best offense, Barbarous Pants is probably the best option over here, simply because you will be sitting already at like 3k offensive ability, thanks to that unbuffed, and then it will go all the way up to like 3.7k or something while you're fighting, and that is reliable. That's the most important part. For the boots, honestly, just like fix your resistances. This doesn't necessarily matter so much, but if you would ask me like what is the most offensive boots out there, it is this one, the Molten Walkers. It's not hard to find at all. 100% chance when you're hit by a melee, this is going to be up 100% of the time, because if you pay attention, it has a 1.5 second cooldown, and then it has a 3 second duration. So we are always getting hit by melee all the time, every 3 seconds anyways. Like, it's going to be constantly up. It will never be down, pretty much. So you'll be fine, basically burning the enemies like as you step, and you're stepping on them as well. So this is yet another very offensive boost, but it will be hard for you to optimize your character, because obviously you're dropping a lot of like HP, you're dropping like armor, I suppose, right? You're dropping some resistances as well. It's going to be hard to optimize, yeah. Lastly, let's talk about the Nefarious Combustion. If you cannot craft this one, what can you go for? You could, to be honest with you, you could go like any sort of like a fire damage relic. You could definitely go for something like Serenity, Mogdragon's Ardor. Those are very valuable as well, simply because they are giving you pluses. This one right over here is giving you like an offensive proc with elemental resistance reduction. But in return, you could definitely go for like, you know, Mogdragon's Ardor and Serenity. If you can craft either one of them, they're very important as well. They will be very good. Otherwise, if you have like some cheap stuff, just try to go for like some flat fire and fire percentages up until you can find any one of these. I think you should be fine. I think the last things that I want to talk about, guys, is that like, how do you build up to this? Like, how do you find this item, for instance? You know, how do you play this character? To be honest with you, I honestly don't know. Like, Grim Dawn is an ARPG that you will need to like farm items with. That is why you keep on grinding in the first place, right? That's the most fun about it. Some stuff are targetable, you can find them reliably. Some stuff are, you know, craftable, and then some stuff you can buy them from like, you know, reputation and stuff. But most of the, you know, bigger legendaries, they're just completely randomized and then they drop like completely luck based. In this case, Infernal Brimstone is probably going to be like your enabler for this spec, if you would like to call it that. And this enabler is going to be coming with, excuse me, just entire pure luck. So yeah, you're gonna need to find this. So how can you get there? You could basically like check out my leveling video 1 to 50 Oathkeeper. You could put up onto this with like a very good two-hander, keep fire damage, continue that way. And then when you reach let's say like ultimates, if this is your first character, I'm, you know, assuming, when you reach ultimate, you could check out the video that I made, the easiest spots, to find like some easy spots on the ultimate difficulty. And it's going to be only covering like all the way up to here or something. So you could definitely like hit a lot of places and try to like grind yourself some legendaries, maybe even like build up to something like this. So this unfortunately is very like heavily dependent on gear, but it is literally the best character I have ever played. So I had to definitely make a video, a build guide out of this, and try to like explain what's going on with the build, try to explain like the strengths and the weaknesses. Maybe there's not so many weaknesses, but just to, you know, say something about the weaknesses that, like, as you can imagine, we are trying to stay in the melee range at all times, because otherwise there's no procs, there's no damage. Some enemies could be, you know, strong enough to, you know, repel you. In that case, that would be the only weakness if you decide to escape. But for you to decide to escape, Ascension needs to be down, you know, this needs to be down, 4 seconds needs to pass, and then maybe you cluster. Well, you don't have a cluster, okay, you used your health pots. This is in cooldown, Ascension is cooldown, then let's run away. You see, like, there's so many back-to-back layers. That's probably not gonna happen, and in the meantime we usually end up killing it anyways. So that is also why it's incredibly sustainable character. I think I'm going to be finishing it right here. Maybe I'll even like come up with like a second video about this and talk about this character a little bit more, especially if you would like me to. And if there's anything that you would like to ask, please feel free to ask in the comment section. I'll be basically, even if I don't answer them in the comments, I'll be checking them out. And on the second video, I'll try and answer these questions about this character. Yeah, that's going to be it, YouTube. Thank you very much for watching. This is Malagant, signing off. See you next time. Peace out.